All right, Logan, welcome to episode 13.
We're in the teens. That's
Teens
crazy.
now. Yeah, man. We were just little single digits. Now we're up
Just
here in
little
the teens.
little baby YouTubers, and now we're
We're teenagers now.
teenagers now. Yeah.
And we haven't been cut off yet. We've only had one warning on that one about alien abductions.
Yeah, I won't kind of. That was just more of a politically correct insertion of context. Here you go, alien abduction. Yeah, and we've had some fun commenters that we've had to deal with. Very fun individuals in the comments. So I view all of it as just landmarks in our channel. So
there you go. And
it's fun.
We like it when people comment.
Yeah, we kind of miss them, don't we? A little bit.
You can say crazy stuff on there. We may not respond back, but we will. Yeah, we will. Anyway, we've had a couple questions come in that are good. So the next episode, after we finish up this delusion, we may do a question and answer, then jump into a new file. Maybe we'll start off with some question and answer, see how that goes, and then if we have time, we'll bust open a new file. Not sure what that one's going to be yet.
Leave in the comments below if you have a conspiracy theory that you'd like us to connect to a biblical worldview.
All right. And we have some other things that we're looking at. We're putting on our investigative reporter hats, and we're checking into a couple of things. We don't know yet if it's gonna be anything. But if it is, we'll have a show on it. That could be the next one if something breaks.
We're going to keep it vague for now, but yes, there's something that we're doing some investigating. I say we, mostly him, and I'm basically just sending him stuff that I see. But yeah, we'll definitely, we're giving you a little bit of teasers here, but we'll see how that pans out. But next episode, regardless of what it is, it'll definitely involve some level of Q&A, which is always fun. That's kind of always been my favorite part of the show. So
the exact question, and I'll read the exact question when we get there. It was to the effect of, do woods, like dense woods, nighttime, but specifically the woods and places like that are sparsely populated, is there a more powerful draw to demonic activity in these areas versus urban? And so I'm gonna tackle that problem because there's a good way to answer that, and I want to do that. Also, talk about how the origins of certain fairies, gnomes, all that are really tied to Nephilim, believe it or not.
So mythical creatures that aren't so mythical.
Right. And so all that, we'll break all that down. And I think she is also, this viewer was also, I think, in that question wanting us to kind of look into all the people who are missing in national parks.
Interesting.
And how some people come back and some people don't after, missing for weeks, days at a time. They find them miles, the little 2-year-old kid, 5-8 miles away. All of them have a unique story behind it. The individual who is really documenting this and spearheading it will not say that it's paranormal, but I believe this. Some old country logic that was given to me when I was a kid. If it walks like a duck and if it quacks like a duck, it's not a chicken. You know what I mean? So if the evidence points in a direction, we'll look at it. That's something that we're working on because it's some of the stuff I could answer right away, and some of the stuff that was in that question I have to do some research on. So we'll definitely answer that after this episode. So we're going to jump back in. Remember, we're still finishing up what this delusion looks like in the last of the last days, because Matthew chapter 24 is filled with all types of clues and nuggets. If an individual said, I want to know what it's going to look like prior to the rapture, you don't need to go past Matthew chapter 24 to get all the building blocks that you're going to need to put together a good structure, so to speak, to know when it's going to happen. I mean, you don't know the exact hour because it says in there you won't, but you can get it close to a season. And in there, some of the signs that Jesus gives, one of them starts off with, be careful for delusion. The delusion is coming in the last of the last days. It's going to accelerate, it's going to gain momentum. It's going to start off slow, and it's going to gain momentum and gain more and more and more to the point that it's going to suck the vast majority of people living in the last of the last days into its trap, to include people who go to church, according to Matthew chapter 24. Now, if you know what to look for, then you can fend that spirit off. But if you don't know what to look for, then you could be captured by it. And that's why we spent probably four episodes on explaining what this delusion looks like, because it's like 19, 20 bullets in a verse that Paul writes describing what Jesus is talking about. And that's where we've been spending so much time. I hope it hasn't bored people, but when you get into the Greek and look at it, it's kind of an eye-opening experience.
It has been for me, that's for sure.
To understand what's happening. Started off with Philaguroi, with self-kissing. Then we went into the misplaced priorities. And then you go into we had loss of parenting rights. We're 6 into the 9 the things that will be lost in the last of the last days. And that starts off with what's going to be lost in the last of the last days is parental rights. The second one, the word was unholy, and that's telling us that we're not going to have a respect. Everything's up for debate. There's just no more, nothing's sacred anymore. And then you go from unholy to ungrateful. There's no thankfulness. The spirit of thanksgiving is gone. And you said last time we were together that you just don't like the idea of losing Thanksgiving as a holiday. But 68% of the people out there don't want that anymore.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling, and not even just because of the turkey, but just the other. I mean, obviously, it's just the whole thing. It should be special, and I think our choice as a society to throw it by the wayside, I think it's shocking. I don't want to rehash my emotions on that, but that's that statistic, that 68% of people that's just awful. Yeah.
And then you had the truce breakers, where there's nobody going to keep their word anymore. Every institution is just going to not be held to any standard, nor will individuals be held to a standard of having to keep their word. It's just not going to be there anymore. We looked at the fifth thing that was lost is false accusers, and we talked about how false accusers means exactly what it can say. People are going to lie on the stand about people and just make up stuff and railroad and all that. But that was just part of it, because that word false accuser comes from the Greek word diaboloi, which means devils. It means Satan. And I told you that, we were looking at that it did mean that about false accusers, but it was also like Paul's personal commentary on don't hate the player, hate the game, so to speak, right? That's what he's saying. Don't hate people, hate the person behind it, and that's Satan and the enemy. And we talked about how that can open up, that demonic influence is going to rise and rise and rise in the last of the last days, and get to the point to where obviously Nephilim is just going to step in and fill in that gap. So that's where we finished off. So verse 3 gives us I think that was the 6th thing, diaboloi. The 7th thing that we're looking at that could be lost is no institutional control. When by that I mean there's going to come a time when there's just nothing, everything that was the systems that are in place now that kind of keep everything in order, law and order, so to speak, everything kind of you drive on one side of the road, not the other. You stop at red lights. You don't go. Well, some people see a yellow light and they speed up, whatever. This is just talking about everything is going to be, there's just going to be a loss of control in the listing. When we're looking at the Greek, the English word there, it says incontinent, which that it comes from the Greek word keotrace, but there's an A in front of it, and then they twist it around and put an oi on it. So that it means, instead of being controlled, because ketrace in the Greek means power, it means control, it means grace under pressure, everything that you would think of as just being controlled, self-control. It describes all that, but it has an A in front of it. So it means no control, no self-control. It means everything that used to control society has gone berserk. So, all the rules and regulations that once kept society in check, bam, it's gone. And everything is just at this point just starts to go crazy because you don't have any systems in place that people respect. Now, you see this happening now, especially with the Supreme Court. Our country was a country of checks and balances at one time, that the legislative, the executive, and the judicial were not supposed to be intertwined the way they are now. That's what makes a two-tiered justice system when you start allowing that, and it is out there. This is not a political show. I will never talk about politics because they just make me mad. So, but you can see how this has affected our politics. It's politics are just disgustingly ugly nowadays, where everybody has to own each other. There is no civility anymore. And this Greek word, akaiotrace, means loss of control, out of balance, no spiritual control, no self-control. And here's the big one. In the first century, this word was used to describe somebody that had zero ability to say no. Now, even remember back when we were had those selfie, when we were doing the Phil Al Gilroy, and we were showing them people laying out there on the ledge of that cliff in India taking a selfie, and like this is the number one cause of death in India because they're going to fall off a cliff.
Of selfie deaths.
Selfie deaths. So think about this. You got to be no control, self-control to get out and do something like this. So that means I would think that that's a symbol of personal akaiotrace. It's just you just have no control. You're just going to go do stupid things. You don't think about the consequences of your actions. And you see that play out on the news all the time with kids these days. They do ignorant things. They eat Tide Pods. That's smart. Let's go drink some bleach. Yeah, that can't hurt me. Let's shoot each other in the chest with frozen paintballs and see if it doesn't stop our heart. These are all stupid things that kids do, but I'm being facetious kind of, but that's what it means. There's just no self-control. I mean, there's just people are going to go nuts. And I think you see that. I think you can go look on any headline or read anything on social media. You see people out of control going nuts. I mean, I could give you a lot of things that people do, but this is a Christian show.
Well, and the oi means it's widespread.
And it's widespread.
It's hard to really even, it's hard to just give a one example of it. It's everywhere.
Here's one thing. People can't say no to the things that they once did. I believe that's the best way to describe this word. You could say no to, like, if you knew you were going to borrow money and you didn't have the money to pay for it, pay it back, you would say no. But now you'll just say, nah, heck with it. I just won't pay it back.
And that ties in with the contracts thing too, like not
Exactly.
not trusting each other's word and not owning up to your own word and taking out debt that you can't pay. And also it's funny how these are all intertwined so nicely. The wanting the government to take control over too many aspects, especially of parenting.
Right.
That applies to, I want the government to honor the contract that I know that I don't want to honor because I have no self-control.
Yeah.
So that one scenario, that bail me out scenario, like touches on like 3 or 4 at least of these line items in this list. Yeah.
So it also means, you know what? I've worked hard my whole life. And I've done everything, I've got a nice house. I'm not saying me, I'm just saying this is what somebody's going to be thinking who falls into this spirit of akaiotrace. I've worked hard my whole life, done everything by the book. I paid my taxes. Today I think I'm going to go out and start shooting heroin. Just for no reason. I mean, illogical things like that become the norm. And people can't say no. This is a time, I believe, that Paul is telling Timothy and telling us when everything becomes unhinged. Everything was getting bad up until this point, but when Achaia trace slips into the part of the delusion, is a quickening going to take place. Everything starts to escalate because nobody can say no at this point. Nobody's going to keep their wedding vows. Nobody's going to what once was wrong now becomes right. So just fill that in any way you want, and you can think of the disgust that's going to happen and take place. And especially for the ones who don't fall for the delusion, because they know what's right and wrong. And then it's even going to be harder for them to just function in everyday society when this one starts to become prevalent. Something we probably haven't ever really thought about. How do we function on a daily basis when everything has gone nuts? When pedophilia is legal? When all this stuff is happening, which is going that way, and we'll get into that in another word in just a minute.
We've already done the first step, which is to normalize the terminology and to create more polite ways of saying.
Oh, we're going to get into that in a minute.
Yeah.
That's going to be one of ours we're going to get into. So just know that everything's going to come unhinged. Your banking, I don't know what banking will look like then, because right now banks have certain guidelines they have to go by before they can loan out money. They can only do so many high risk loans and still maintain. These guys are not going to be saying no to loans anymore. They're just going to be writing, underwriting is going to become ignorant. And so basically it's going to make banks implode. Your educational system, once you can start saying 2 + 2 is 12, once you can say that gravity doesn't really work, terminal velocity is not 32 feet per second. All these math equations that are constants, you can fill in anything on there. And then I don't know what engineers are going to do.
AI.
Yeah, I don't know, because I don't trust AI. But think about engineers who they have to work within sets of laws. Especially structural engineers. But then you have people coming in and saying, man, it's all right. Well, I guess we could try that. You have a bunch of Leaning Tower of Pisas, I guess. You got
unintentional.
all your government agencies that are already broken now. They've already been broken for years. They're just going to become just a cesspool, I reckon. Your civic and private organizations, they all come unhinged. There's no fiscal responsibility. There's no civic responsibility. There's no moral responsibility. And all that starts to get into the church at this time. So you can see how these things are starting to not only get worse, but that you can see how they feed off of each other and make everything worse. So when you keep adding one to the mix, add another one to the mix, by now things are chaos. In the last of the last days, prior to Christ coming back, it's just total chaos. It has to be that way for somebody to step up and say, I've got the answers.
Yeah.
All this delusion is bringing chaos from one side of the globe to the other, so someone can come in and say, I've got the answer. That's what this delusion is building up for. And I think we see it in the world today, without a doubt. I think we see a lot of that in the world today. The eighth thing that will be lost in the last of the last days is found in 2 Greek words. The first one here is fierce. And it comes from the Greek word anemaroi. And nemaroi, without the A in front of it, means something that is very cultured. It means something that is sophisticated. It is something that is patient with others. Sounds like it's describing me, doesn't it?
I like how a few episodes ago you threw me under the whole being arrogant and prideful or whatever. And okay, sure.
Yeah. So this isn't describing me, but when you put that A in front of it, it's just basically saying there is nothing that is cultured, there is nothing that is sophisticated, and no one is going to be patient with each other. But if that's all anemaroi meant, that wouldn't be a bad thing, and it wouldn't be listed here in these 8 things that are going to be lost. What it is saying is societal rules that keep we're going to get into law and order in just a minute, because there's a word that definitely governs that, but those things, those rules that are in place within society that keep us acting like we're civilized, gone. That's what this word means. It means savage, barbaric spread of violence is going to become the norm, where where once upon a time somebody cut you off in traffic, you might shoot them a bird. Now you shoot a 45 at them. You know what I'm saying? So it's just going to be widespread violence is going to take over, starting with children all the way up to people who should know better, like in their 80s and 90s. All you have to do is you can Google and you can find 1,000 news articles that describe this. Little kids taking guns to school and shooting each other. Bam, here it is. It's a Nemaroy. I read an article, the two 80-year-old guys, North Carolina, I think not far from here, got into an argument over their property line, wound up shooting each other and killing each other. Now, I don't know. That's like a cartoon. Me and you pull guns and shoot each other, and I guess they both hit each other just right. And by the time the police officers got there, there's two old men laying on the property line.
I shouldn't be laughing about that, but that's...
No, it is funny because it's stupid. You know, for one thing, they're fighting over a property line. They're 80-something years old, and I guess they're afraid they'd break their arms punching each other. So they get guns, and then through their...
I don't think they thought any of that through.
through their wobbly hand shooting, they ended up hitting each other. And then they were both dead. And I thought, well, that's a Nemaroy. And people just settle their disputes going old school violence, you know, and we see that everywhere. I mean, road rage violence, every day you see something in the news local about people getting into all kind of fisticuffs over just driving down the road. You know, I mean, come on. So a Nemaroy is the same word that described the viciousness that took place in the gladiator games. So when they would put a man in there to fight 3 lions and a bear, that kind of gets vicious and gets ferocious, and it gets very, very violent and bloody, and that's what it's describing. It's not just it's describing a bloodlust. It's describing there's going to come a time when people lust after seeing gore like right in front of them. It's not good enough to watch it on TV. You want to actually go out there and watch these guys kill each other in the street. That's cool. That's fun. That's entertainment. That's what it's saying it's going to be like in the last of the last days before Christ comes back. It's like the Holy Spirit here is prophesying through Paul. There's going to be a strange obsession with the barbaric. There's going to be a strange obsession with violence. There's going to be a strange obsession with not just violence as, you know, bang, bang, shoot 'em up. I'm talking violence and death and destruction that goes against the pale. Is what this is describing. And I think you can see what used to be grotesque and kind of gross people out 30 years ago. People sit there and eat a sandwich and watch it. It's no big deal.
Yeah, that's very true. We've been desensitized to that kind of thing.
And it's only going to get worse. If you think that it's stopping, you would be wrong. I'm not saying let's be like Tipper Gore and go take everything off the shelves that has a bad word in it or a gun, you know, a video game. I don't think video games per se cause people to go and kill other people. But I'm saying that video games, if that's all you do and you're not balanced, it can desynthesize. You know, I would always tell my kids when they would play the violent games, hey, look, you know, this is make-believe. You know, you get a real gun out and start shooting at people are going to die. And so if you're going to let your kids play those games, you need to explain that to them. I think it's a smart move. I'm not one of those guys that says take it all away from them. But everything should be done in moderation.
Just like earlier with social media, I don't think every aspect. I mean, here we are on YouTube posting videos. I think if you view media and content in general as supplementing, not replacing, that's one thing. But if you're actively replacing your life experience with augmenting that via simulating either warfare, in your case with the violent video games, or in social interactions with, you know, social media of any kind, I think our overall desensitization has happened because of Hollywood, yes, because of video games, yes, but I think in general there's so many variables that have contributed to that it's hard to it is kind of hard to just point at one thing and say that's causing the problem. And I think it is convenient for people to point at, you know, violent video games or or movies or whatever. But the fact that this is talking about barbaric levels of not only activity but also obsession and interest on people who aren't necessarily partaking, that to me is bigger than just the issue of we're watching too many action movies or playing too many action video games. It seems like there's something deeper with the spirit of delusion.
Yeah.
More so than those
sure.
things could do.
For sure. See, a lot of your generation like that Walking Dead, that Walking Dead show where the zombies are all that. This word for fierce kind of says that that's what it's going to be like too, because people have been violently abused and because of other things within the environment and drugs, alcohol. Streets of Philadelphia. You want to Google trank, the drug trank in Philadelphia, put those two words in, and it looks like the Day of the Living Dead or whatever. People just laid out there. This stuff eats the flesh. Where they needle in, where they mainline in, whether it's their arms, their legs, their neck, wherever they can find a vein to mainline, it starts to eat the flesh away, but yet they're still alive. And they look like they just came off of the set of Walking Dead, but that's not makeup and that's not special effects. That is the drug killing them literally from the inside out, and they're walking around among people and they look just like the Walking Dead. It's amazing. It's appalling, really. And then every time I see these people who swarm and break into places and they just let them, it just goes against the retired police officer, everything in me. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But that's part of this too, falls into that. This wholesale theft, this doesn't matter. I saw a video of a guy who in a store, just like you're walking into like the QT just to go do something, and 3 or 4 guys run in, throw everybody on the ground. They're putting 40 calibers in their mouth as they pat them down and try to pull their wallets and stuff out while the other guys are robbing the store for the cash registers. And I'm thinking, that person just moves that guy's finger depending on the trigger pull. There could be people being killed. I mean, that's violence right there being played out everywhere, all across our nation right now. It's just getting worse. You were talking about pedophilia. When they change it to youth-attracted individuals, and they don't use the word pedophilia, they're trying to take pedophilia out of the lexicon and replace it with youth-attracted adults.
Or I've heard MAP, a minor attracted person.
A minor attracted person. Both of those are hideous.
Yeah, it's disgusting. I mean, it's so clearly a backtracking and reestablishing of the language in order to justify and enable.
Exactly.
It's so obvious. Like, if you don't see it as literally enabling pedophilia to become a moral, like, positive or not,
it's a blight.
Yeah, I mean, it's literally inverting such a grotesque crime into something that is this padded, safe, comfortable term. MAP, minor attracted person.
I think the fact that they're even saying that now tells us we're further along in this delusion than maybe we even see.
Yeah.
Because that's the epitome of delusion, when you can start rewording something to try to take away the stigma of the grotesque evil that it represents. Then we are further along on this than we probably really realize, because that, my friend, is something I never could have ever imagined would take place.
And I think, to give the devil their due, the people who support that sort of language change, I understand that people look at Christians like us who say these sorts of things and they think you are so incredibly judgmental and closed-minded to people's urges. And I think the same thing is true with transgenderism. They have an innate urge to feel as though they are not in the right body. Or homosexuality. A lot of them say that they were born that way. And whether that be the case, or if it was learned, or if it was a mixture of the two. I don't really care, and I think that's where a lot of Christians die on the hill, in my opinion, in vain. I don't think we should be arguing whether or not you were born with it. I think we should be arguing, were you born with a sin inclination? Yes. Mm-hmm. Does that mean you were born with an inclination to be attracted to the same sex, to be the opposite gender, or to be attracted to minors? Regardless, you shouldn't justify or pad or soften the blow on what an atrocity it is, especially the pedophilic example.
It's a sin issue.
It's padding a sin issue, and it's ultimately what I think it's doing is it's, as we've kind of realized with how seriously they're taking the identifying as, let's say, a he or a she or a they or a them, that identity word, that's the part that I think should really be the focus, the identity. It's they're identifying as gay or as bisexual or as trans or as a map or whatever. I think the identity is proof that this whole delusion is taking what used to just be seen as sin and as a difference in action to that is who you are. So the sin that you engage in, whether it be, any of those examples, that's not only just part of you or, something you do, it's who you are. And so I think because people are starting to see that sin is really just who you are, you should embrace it and make it a good thing. That's where the kind of ideology stems from, changing the terminology to justify and to soften the blow on pedophiles. So I think that's that same spirit of delusion of that's who you are.
It's very delusional. And police officers are the enemy. They get assaulted all the time, and nobody really reports it like they should. This is the crazy that's happening in our world that's tied to this particular Greek word, fierce, and it's pretty much only going to get worse. So peace, tranquility, patience with others, law and order, it's one of those things that's going to be gone in the last of the last days. And I think we see a Roy happening all around us really too fast. This is one that's gaining. I think this one here's got a little afterburner on it, just kind of going crazy right now. It's climbing the scale pretty quick. The eighth thing that will be lost in the last of the last days is law and order. Verse 3 says, men will be despisers of those things that are good. And despisers of those things that are good comes from a Greek word called philagathoi. And philagathoi, you got phil's love. Agathoi is the Greek word for everything that is good. So the love for everything that is good, put an A in front of it, and it becomes the opposite, because this is actually the word we're looking at here comes from philagathoi, but Paul writes it as aphilagathoi. So he's basically telling Timothy, reverse this definition, and that's what's going to happen. And so this is a word, philagathoi, is a word that is in the Greek language. We already went over a word, philaguroi, that the Holy Spirit made up. You only find it one time in the Greek language, and that is in this verse, the self-kissing, in this chapter. Here we have a word that is only used in the literature or in theater in the Greek language, is philagathoi, because this describes a fictitious place. This word right here, philagathoi, is describing a fictitious place in the first century. It could be a country. It could be a city. It could be a county. It could even be just a castle, like just, a family clan of people living in it, just, any of that. But it's talking about this fictitious place that philagathoi is describing, is a place that has, well, you say the laws are inverted. So in this place that philagathoi is explaining, it's a place where the innocent people go to jail and the criminals are set free. So the laws are against law-abiding citizens. So if you are a robber, if you're a rapist, if you're a murderer, you get arrested and go free, and then the victim is the one that winds up paying either a fine because they were a victim, or they go to jail. It's just a place If you ever watch Seinfeld, they call it Bizarro World. There was an episode where they were in Bizarro World. Remember? And this word here is describing Bizarro World on steroids, man. Timothy looks at it and goes, "What is he talking about? A place where there's no this is like
Sounds like an over exaggeration. Like there's no way.
yes,
Yeah, that's why. Yeah.
But this is one of those where probably when the Bible was being translated from Greek into English for the first time, those translators are probably like, "What in the world? This is never
Kind of like
gonna,
the self-kissing word.
This
Like,
is not
what is
gonna.
that?
What, this is never going to happen. How do we even translate this? What do we say?" So unfortunately, I believe we see that happening now with some of our district attorneys who are letting people go for heinous crimes, and then people are being sued for really no crime and having to pay a $350-400 million fine, civil fine, for doing business as usual. We see this happening now right in front of our face. And the sad thing is there's nothing. What are you going to do about it? I mean, we go down and say, look, what are you doing letting people out of jail? The district attorneys, the solicitor, at least our solicitors here in this area aren't wackadoodles like in some places, but New York, Chicago, L.A., all those, well, if it's a George Soros funded district attorney, they're doing Phil Agathoy. Bottom line, they're very consistent with that, of doing the wrong thing. So think about living in a place where people who commit these murder and violent crimes, they get out on no bond and then they do it again and you wonder why. But you see it. The Greeks said it. They said this in 65 AD was going to happen, and here it is happening. It took it this long to get to that point, but that fictitious, weird place that was only talked about in the first century in the Greek language, in theater and in writing, well, it is a reality now. It went from a fictitious fantasy world to be just everyday reality.
Yeah, obviously that's not one of those ones where it's like a 8 or 9 out of 10, but it is definitely on the map.
The fact that it's a 2 or a 3 is appalling.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, even though there's probably just a couple examples like that each, year or so in this country at least, that the fact that there is any moment like that where somebody gets let free and then immediately does the same thing over. I've heard so many examples of that where criminal literally has like 10 plus arrests and just gets let out immediately and just does the same thing again. It is just a complete, like you said, inversion of reality. Like that's just the opposite of logic and of reason and of just a stable society. You can't have a stable society if victims are afraid to report a crime and a criminal is not afraid to go to jail or face repercussions.
That's the times we live in now in certain areas of our country. It's the craziest thing I've ever seen. Good luck with that. Loyalty in relationships is the next one that comes up on our bullets. Now we've switched out of things that are going to be lost. This is just going to be something that happens all the time now. And it says for men, for anthropos shall become traitors. Prototype. And prototype means to sell somebody out. It means to have no commitments in friendships. It means willing to break a friendship off at the drop of a hat for no reason at all. Just no loyalty. There's just no more loyalty. Loyalty is gone in the last of the last days. And it just means, people are going to be hurt a lot, I guess, because you can never have trust because nobody's going to really be friends anymore. So that's a delusion that we need to be looking out for. Any questions on that one? That's pretty self-explanatory.
I'm just seeing how that one connects directly with the breaking contracts thing again, where it's
they all connect.
It's contracts and unspoken contracts, like with friends, family relationships.
Same thing. Yeah. Yep. So there it is. And then the next up, it says men will be heady, which means headstrong. But people have always been headstrong. People have always been hard-headed. My mom said I was hard-headed when I was a kid. So that doesn't really mean, because this comes from the Greek word propates. And propates means reckless, fast decisions again, no consequences. It just means I'm going to live life at a fast, breakneck speed, and you can't convince me otherwise. So I don't know. To me, there's not a lot of difference between this one and the one we just went over a couple ago, except for the reckless, fast decision, just living life at a reckless abandon, and because of it, the word is propates, means once you get captivated with this, you're not going to change because it's headstrong. You're just once you fall into this deception, and maybe it means all the deception. Once you get deep into it, maybe you can't unravel it. I don't know.
So like all those previous bullet points will kind of harden and solidify with that same spirit of that headstrong, like
yes,
not being shaken out of those habits.
You're not going to be shaken out, and it's going to happen with all people because this is another widespread. Because this is a widespread word without having to use the oi. It also means it's going to be this way within all your civic, within all your politics, with all your financial decisions, all major decisions. You're going to pick the wrong, you're going to do the wrong thing. And no matter if somebody shows you evidence that that's the wrong thing to do, I'm not going to change my mind. So it means it's almost like once you're locked into it, once it's got its grip on you, it's not letting go. It's kind of what I interpret that as. So I guess once all these things start to take over, it just makes sense that you're just going to be ate up with it, and it's like a vice on you, and you're not gonna let it go. It's going to add. I would say it's just going to add to the chaos in the end, wouldn't you?
Yeah, definitely.
All right. The next on the list of unmasking delusion, men will be high-minded. What do you think of that?
I mean, I really don't know what this particular one, because obviously I know it sounds generally like some of the other ones we've already talked about. So what's the specific
All right,
language
so
on that
this one here is men will be high-minded. It comes from the Greek word typhou fomenoi. All right, so the typhou part of this is where we get the typhoon word typhoon from. So back before when we were talking about diaboloi, where we said that Paul kind of give us a personal commentary saying, stop, wait, and remember you're not angry with people. You're angry with what's pushing the people, the power behind it. Here's another one of those stop moments that Paul has given us, but it is a word of encouragement because of the typhoi. It means, this word can mean three things. It means people are going to be prideful, puffed up, heartless, and lack empathy, which we already know that's going to happen by all the other definitions. This word also could mean that they have unfettered access to the things that produce pride within them, like you mentioned it earlier, AI, your quantum computing that's coming, all those things that can make you godlike. So that kind of adds to this. But I think the typhoon part is what? Because all those other two definitions for this word we've already seen played out all through the definitions. They just play on that, right? I think this is one where Paul's saying, all right, people who don't fall for the delusion, be encouraged. It's going to be short-lived because typhoons come in, they make a bunch of destruction, and then they're gone. They don't last for weeks. They're just pretty quick, like a big hurricane. It's in, it destroys, and it goes. It's saying that all this delusion that I'm talking about is going to come in, it's going to destroy a bunch of stuff, but in the process, it's going to be a short window because Christ is going to rapture the church, and you're going to get away from it. So it is telling you that there's going to be a break. It's telling you, hold on, persevere. You're going to make it through, just like if you've ever been in a hurricane and everything's rattling and shaking and it's like, wow, man, this is crazy. And the water's coming up and all of a sudden the water starts to go down and you made it.
Yeah, so this is a little bit of encouraging right here. Yeah, I like that. That's good.
It's saying, so he said, just hold on. It'll be over. It'll be over soon. So I think that's what it's describing. So the next up on our delusion, it says, for men will be lovers of pleasure more than lovers of God. This comes from Phil Aldenoi, Mallow, and then you got another Phil, Foinoi, which because one is saying lovers of in one definition, it says lovers of pleasure more than lovers of God. So you got one saying love pleasure, one saying love God. So what you got to look for this is philadone, which is what is really saying here, is the word for hedonism. All right, but it's not just hedonism. If you think of all the hedonistic things that go on now, and there's some pretty hedonistic stuff out there, right? It's going to make hedonism look kind of like PG. You know what I'm saying? It's just taking hedonism to a whole new level where you don't sacrifice anything. I guess the only sacrifice you make is for having a good time. You know what I'm saying? So it's the opposite of philophenoi, which means loving God and living for God. So that's what it's saying. But this word malwan that's in there, that Greek word, is a funny word because right here Paul shifts, and he's not talking to the world, he's talking to the church. He's saying that in the last of the last days, if none of this other stuff gets the church, all these other things that I've listed of this delusion, the one thing that the church needs to watch out for, the biggest delusion that's going to come, is this hedonistic lifestyle that you're going to chase after. If it feels good, do it. He said that's the one that runs the greatest chance of infiltrating the church and making the church almost non-existent in the last of the last days, because he put that simple word in there. So to me, this is a wake-up call to the church, to people who believe, that don't let the spirit of philadonoi get in the way, because you'll start chasing after personal pursuits of pleasure over the desire to serve God, which I think you see that in church already. Yeah. So verse 5, finally got to verse 5. We're rolling. We'll be done with this pretty soon. Having a form of godliness but denying the power. Now this one here comes from the Greek word describing virtue. So this isn't talking about churches per se. This is talking about people who want to become an activist. They get involved in these things that appear pious, that appear above themselves. They're serving something higher than themselves. They're saving the environment. Okay, they're sailing across that little Greta, whatever her little smart alecky name is.
Thunberg.
Yeah, whatever. You know, people like her to get on their moral high horse and tell me that I shouldn't drive my Jeep. I just drive it right over. You know what I mean? So, I mean, to me, it's because she's chasing. She doesn't ever talk about God. None of these people do. The environment is their God.
Yeah, Mother Nature.
Mother Nature is their God. And if you want to believe that, believe it. I mean, but don't force that on me, because I don't force what I believe on you. Don't force that on me and make me drive an electric car. You know, and I'm just kind of being facetious on that. I believe we should be good stewards of our planet. But I believe that the pendulum can go both ways, and there's nobody in the middle anymore. And these people are really taking this too far. Yeah. That it's not just your environmentalist wackos; it's other people who are taking things too far. In the same thing, in the name of piety. You know, let's do away with the police force, and let's reimagine life without police. You come into that from a pious high horse if you think that you can do away with law enforcement and not have total anarchy.
Yeah, that's clearly delusional.
There's good in all people, okay? But we have to understand that we can never jump into activism and replace that with serving God. Mm-hmm. And we all need to be active in trying to do better, but not let our activism become a replacement for a walk with Jesus. And that's what's happened. The more people today in 2024 are seeking spiritual awakening than ever before. It has nothing to do with church, has nothing to do with Christianity. It's they're seeking a spiritual awakening. And all that has to do with right here, Phil Adonoi, where you're just not, where you're doing good, but you're denying the power of God. Basically, you're saying, there is no Holy Spirit. I don't need the Holy Spirit anymore. And this right here starts to push the Holy Spirit he doesn't. Nothing can push the Holy Spirit back. This delusion here, I believe, God starts allowing the Holy Spirit to pull back, and He starts allowing because He has to pull back to a point for the church to be raptured. And I believe He's already started to pull Himself back. But this, saying that you love God but denying the power of God is, all this activism. People want to do that. The Holy Spirit says, then go chase that, and let me show you what happens when I pull back. And we're going to see the consequences of that moving forward. That is, we've exhausted the list. Those are all the points. We finally arrived. That's what delusion looks like in the last of the last days.
Wow. Well, I think that benchmarks a pretty sturdy part of our show thus far. I know, again, we started this show talking about how there will be a great deception, great delusion that will bring in Nephilim into the equation. And next episode, it sounds like we're going to kind of tie some of that together with some questions about demon activity in the wilderness and some other interesting topics kind of alongside that, and maybe even touching on a whole new conspiracy theory altogether. So
the one that we're investigating.
That one, or maybe the Mel's Hole, possibly. There's several theories that our viewers have kind of put to our focus, and some that we've kind of come across on our own.
I think Mel's Hole would be fun because it's just kind of whimsical.
Yeah,
and it's kind of fun, and it's definitely a paranormal. It falls into the paranormal. It falls into legend. It falls into conspiracy, and it falls into just what we're about. So maybe we need to like reel it in and do some Mel's Holing and then get back into some other stuff.
Yeah, that'll be TBD. We're gonna think about that this week and kind of talk to our viewers a little bit more. And please be part of that conversation in the comments.
Yeah.
Leave your ideas on what you'd like for us to talk about next. And other than that,
if you have any questions on the delusion that we have talked about for 4 weeks, get those questions in because we like to hit those before we move to another topic.
Definitely. Yeah.
All right.
Do that.
So we'll see you on episode 13.
14.
See you then.